FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb, also a CNBC contributor, serving on the board of Pfizer and Illumina. Nice to see you, Dr. Gottlieb. It'll obviously be a huge headline that President Trump cuts ties with the World Health Organization in the middle of a pandemic. What does it actually mean in reality?
Well, the immediate impact is going to be on programs that were only administered by the World Health Organization. So public health programs that were co-administered by other organizations and the WHO, the U.S. can continue to fund through those other organizations and probably will. So you have to look at the programs where the WHO is the only participant. And the only one I could think of right now is the polio eradication program. We won't be able to fund that because the WHO is the only participant in that program. But the broader implication is, the WHO did play more of a role, I think, in developing markets. And as you see COVID become epidemic in the Southern Hemisphere, and you see risk to South America and Western Africa, notwithstanding the fact that the WHO had major problems, and I think the president's right, the organization was troubled. There's a lot we can do to reform it. It was helpful in those markets. And I think now that they have a series of turnover related to this and less money available overall, and just the uncertainty it creates, it's going to put a wrench in their ability to respond in those markets.
Dr. Gottlieb, I guess we were sort of warming up to this announcement, though, from the president. Whether or not we would quite get there or not was still to be determined, of course. What would you give out of 10 a rating for the WHO and the handling of this crisis? Was this decision by the president warranted?
Well, I think the president's right in his criticism of the WHO. I think he's right about China's influence in the WHO. The WHO was slow to disclose information about the crisis. They were slow to push China. I think that we still need to conduct an investigation of just the circumstances around the early disclosure of the information around the outbreak in China and what wasn't made available. I mean, China was very slow to disclose the fact that they knew that there was human-to-human transmission with this virus and that there was sustained community transmission. And that would have been helpful information to know sooner than we knew it, and they knew it much earlier than we found out. And the WHO is culpable in that. But the WHO properly reformed, I think, is better than the WHO just out there not properly resourced. And so I would have preferred to try to make moves to reform it. One of the things you could have done is push the WHO to admit Taiwan to the World Health Assembly. That would have been a way to push back on China through the WHO. So there were other things you can do to try to, I think, put pressure on China through the WHO rather than just pull the funding out of it. And I would have preferred to see that. But I think the president's right that the WHO is badly in need of reform. Unfortunately, we're just not going to get it right now.
Right. So here we are, Dr. Gottlieb, wrapping up another week of reopening the great experiment. We're seeing a record number of tests across this country. What parameters are we looking at in terms of how we can measure whether the virus is slowing or staying the same or worsening?
Well, the good news is testing's going up. We hit a record number of tests yesterday, almost 500,000. The positivity rate, the number of tests that come back positive, is going down. So that's all a good sign. We're trending in the right direction. What we need to be looking at is hospitalizations, because as testing goes up, we're going to capture more cases. And so that data becomes a little less reliable in terms of gauging whether or not the epidemic's expanding or contracting. Hospitalizations are relatively stable. And what we see is there were 2 weeks of declines in hospitalizations. Hospitalizations went up a week ago. And when you look at the data over the past week, granted it's skewed by the Memorial Day holiday, you get less reporting over holidays and over weekends, but it seems to be going down again. Not a lot, but it's going down from the week prior. So that's good news, and it's trending in the right direction. I think we'll have a successful reopening. I don't think we're going to see a major uptick in cases this summer because I do think there's going to be a seasonal effect here. But we're not going to fully get rid of this virus. We're going to have a slow simmer of infection through the summer. It's never going to completely go away. Probably the cases that we're seeing right now, the sort of 15,000 to 20,000 cases that we're turning over right now, we might see that through most of the summer. Maybe it goes down a little more in July and August. But it does set up some risk for the fall, that we have a base of infection in this country, and we could see a resurgence when we get into the fall.
Ken Frazier, the Merck CEO, joined us earlier this week, Dr. Gottlieb, and I felt like he struck a more pessimistic tone in terms of when there will be a widely available vaccine, suggesting much more being middle to late next year as opposed to this year. Well, what's your latest take on that, when there will be a widely available vaccine for all Americans?
Well, the good news is that the data that we've seen affirms that we probably can develop a vaccine against COVID. I think we will successfully develop a vaccine. And we're investing in advanced manufacturing, so we may even have the doses available in the fall to inoculate a large population. I don't think we're going to turn over the large-scale clinical trials that we need to determine whether these vaccines are safe and effective and give us confidence to use them on a broad scale this year. I think it's aggressive and optimistic to think that we're going to get through those trials this year, and it's probably a 2021 event. Because you have a large number of asymptomatic people, 20 to 40% are asymptomatic, so that makes it so you have to enroll larger trials. And you also don't know where to enroll those trials. We don't know where the outbreaks are going to be, so we have to wait until the fall to start seeing where the disease is, to start really enrolling patients in cities where there's outbreaks to determine whether the vaccine's working.
So quick question on the bridge to a vaccine, Dr. Gottlieb. We're still awaiting a number of data points from clinical trials. What are you specifically looking at? What makes you excited as we see these treatment results, everything from antibody cocktails to anti-inflammatory drugs? What should we be looking for?
Well, what we can have by the fall, we have remdesivir. Maybe by the fall we'll have some antibody-based drugs. Regeneron, Amgen's working on that, Vir Biotechnology, and Lilly. Hopefully they'll have those drugs on the market by the fall, but we'll be very dose-limited in how much quantity we have. On the vaccines, I think we're going to be turning over more data in June on those vaccines. And if we see those vaccines generating high levels of antibodies that are what we call neutralizing, they actually bind to the virus and destroy it, high titers of those antibodies, that's a really hopeful sign. Some of the early vaccines, the Chinese vaccine from CanSino, produced neutralizing antibodies, but at low levels. The vaccines that the American manufacturers are working with seem to be more robust. They're producing higher levels of antibodies. And if we continue to see that in the clinical data, that's going to be a really positive sign.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Scott Gottlieb, always good to check in with you on a Friday afternoon. Thank you very much for the info.
Thanks a lot.